It's a new dawn. It's a new day. It's a new life. It's 2025. I finally got through. Not that I mean, I'm sure there's going to be like the errant 2024 movie that I'm going to end up but I finally got my glut of 2024 backlog of reviews from all of those screeners, which I still didn't even watch all of them. I just kind of gave up after a while. Most of them didn't have audio description, but we're kicking off 2025. This is Back in Action. I'm John Stark from MacMovieGuy.com. I'm a blind film critic, and I would love for you to click that like and subscribe button because 2025 is going to be awesome. Hopefully. We'll see. Um, but I started with Back in Action, and I started it with a different twist. This was the first quality check that I performed. Not with anybody asking me to do it, but uh, to be fair, I was not a professional quality checker for this film. But I did a thing called Quality Check Back in Action, where when I watched this film, I essentially like live blogged it, and I did that for my thoughts on the audio description track, which is produced by Descriptive Video Works, written by Beth Rand, and narrated by Nefertiti Solomon-Matafaris, who immediately let me know I spelled her name wrong. But it was basically stream of consciousness, and I was spelling her name, and I was like, fuck, I should check this. And I was like, I haven't really checked anything else at this point, so we're going with it. But yeah, made a mental note to go back through and spell her name correctly. And the fun thing was, I went into it and I didn't know anything. I didn't know which company did it. I didn't know who wrote it, and I didn't know who narrated it. It was just a cold watch for me. So you're gonna get a little bit of that here. So what's the movie about? Because I also haven't reviewed this movie. This could be an interesting 2025 because I need to talk more about audio description, but I also need to talk about the films if I haven't seen them before. So it's basically a spy movie, but this is Cameron Diaz's big return because she actually retired a few years ago, and then now she's like unretiring. So I'm happy she's back. So I was excited to see this movie, which is one of the reasons why I was excited to start my 2025 with this movie, was because of Cameron. I haven't seen her in a few years. She was in a couple of iffy movies back to back, and then she just kind of gave up. And I would love, not that I think her jumping into Netflix movies is necessarily going to give her the opposite reaction of what she got the first time around, but I really want her back. I've always loved Cameron Diaz, and I enjoy her as an actress. A couple of times I think she's flirted with potential of awards consideration, and I would still love that for her. So she co-stars here with Jamie Foxx, who obviously is also back after a tremendous life event for himself. And the two of them together worked in Annie. They were both in Annie together, so they're back together. So they already have on-screen chemistry, which is felt throughout this film. You can feel that they have a great back and forth. They're this spy couple, and they do a mission where they basically go and get a MacGuffin. Doesn't really matter what they get. It's a MacGuffin. Even in my quality check when I was live, I just kept calling it a MacGuffin. I was like, they found the MacGuffin. Because it doesn't matter what it is. It's just the thing that's used to further the plot, but it has absolutely no bearance or relevance on anything. But it's a key. A key to what? Who cares? So they have to steal it from a bad guy, and they do, and of course it ruins their life. But lots of action sequences, lots of fight choreography. There's a plane crash that I'm sure Netflix spent a little bit of money on. And we flash forward 15 years, and they're hiding out in suburbia with two kids, and pretending not, and trying to hide out and not be spies, and nobody's found them yet. But after a fortuitous night where their 14-year-old daughter goes to a club and hangs out with a bunch of older boys, they're caught on camera and they trend as being boomers who can fight, basically, which picks people up and puts them on their radar. Their former boss, played by Kyle Chandler, finds them first. Things go awry, and later on, they run into a British spy played by Andrew Scott. And then they have to seek refuge at Cameron's mother's place, who's British, and is played by Glenn Close. Because Glenn will work for food. She will be in literally anything. I did not expect that to be Glenn Close. I didn't know she was in this. And then when we hit credits, I was like, that was Glenn Close? What? What is she doing? She's in everything now. Glenn, this is not going to get you an Oscar. God, she was in, what was the last thing I saw her in? Brothers? And then before that, it was The Deliverance? Fire your agent. Fire them. So, yes. I actually enjoyed Back in Action, so it doesn't sound like I did, but no, it's not great. And there are going to be a lot of YouTube critics on here who are going to come in and say, it's another Netflix movie of the week, and my life was, oh my God, this movie brought me close to suicide. I can't do these Netflix movies anymore. It's like, yeah, I feel that a lot of times, but not with this one. There were some movies last year that I thought unfairly got that tag, but were actually relatively entertaining. Damsel was one of them. There aren't that many. You think I'd be able to name like all 5 of them? But I actually kind of enjoyed Lift as dumb fun. I think this is a little bit better than Lift. So I had more fun with this, but not quite as much fun as like Beverly Hills Cop Acts Left. But yeah, somewhere sort of in between that. So to start off the year, I always start off the year weird because it's like I find out that a lot of times I've graded something too high and that it doesn't mesh with everything else as I'm going throughout the year when I'm making my 2025 list. So, but I feel like with this movie, I would watch it again. Like I had that feeling when I was done. Like I wouldn't mind watching it again. I felt like time flew pretty well. And it doesn't always make smart choices. No, not everything in this script is great, which is why I think a B grade for it is pretty solid. But I want to talk about the audio description because that's what I did at length. And it took me a while. A quality check for the movie means I have to spend more time with the movie than I do the length of the movie because I often had to pause it. So, um, so here are my thoughts on the audio description for Back in Action. I thought it was pretty good. We opened up with a lot of establishing stuff. I made a joke because I thought I heard something else other than tiled, but I was like, it's got to be tiled roofs, red tiled roofs. But I thought we had a pretty good description of the European city. And then we pulled in and we were getting great description of like these European palatial estates, the furniture, the antique furniture. We got our first character description was for Cameron, and she was described as being, blonde and light, fair-skinned, with a black dress. And the reason why that caught my attention was I thought that meant we were going to avoid like racial definitions, like white, black, and then I was wondering, well, what would happen? What are we going to do for anybody sort of in between? Any, Latinx or Middle Eastern or anything? Because I don't know who's going to appear in this movie. I don't know where we're going. Didn't appear that we got any of that. Appears like everybody in here is either black or white. Or in the case of Cameron Diaz, fair-skinned. She's the only person who's ever labeled fair-skinned and not white. It's really weird. It's a weird choice. Like, pick a lane. Does Cameron not want to be referred to as white? Are we worried because her last name is Diaz that giving that label to her is inaccurate? I think a lot of times actors don't have the same names I don't know what Cameron's deal is. I think we're overthinking the last name of Diaz. I do. Um, so I don't think she identifies as Latinx. If that's what we're worried about. That would be an interesting choice for her, um, but maybe that's why we got there. But as soon as we get to Jamie Foxx, he's a suave black man. And then we do get notes about his hair and his beard. He's sitting on a bed. I don't know what you mean by suave, because suave could mean sort of slick, like a ladies' man type of thing. I have a feeling that it's being used here as a synonym for handsome, um, but it doesn't always mean handsome. So something can be suave. Usually, it's when you use it, you mean like slick, like smooth. Like smooth operator type of thing. Smooth operator. Uh, so after that, um, there's a scene where she's looking at pregnancy tests and she's sad. So we got great audio description with that. They're getting ready and he's making a phone call, looking out the window, looking at a mirror, sorry, and then they leave. We get a shot of them driving down the road. Head to this estate. We're getting a lot of exposition in terms of dialogue, and then they roll up on this estate, which has it's a giant home with turrets, and they use turrets a lot in this. There's another giant home that we'll see later on where they also mention it has turrets. I was like, man, every home has turrets. So yes, it's a big palatial estate. They roll up on. We see them putting away their guns into a glove box that also has passports and stuff like that in the car. Cameron puts on some earpieces, and then they sort of roll in. Just sort of general statements about how the size of the house. In general, there's a guy who's sort of like a token disposable villain, central villain. I can't remember what his name is. It's Goro or something like that. And Cameron has to meet him and get his fingerprint and then go upstairs and open a safe. She does that successfully. And then everybody else is sort of referred to as like a goon or a thug, and not really given any definition beyond that, which I'm fine with because they're all disposable. When you use terms like goon and thug, it just sort of is like, these are disposable characters. We don't need to go into deep detail about what they're wearing or what they look like, or, they're there to get their ass kicked. And then move on. So that's kind of what happens. There was a weird choice of word for library. It was like expansive office. It was like expansive office or something like that. And I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, does it just mean it has a ton? So I was like, I feel like it just means it has there's a ton of shit in here. Computers, fax machines, just whatever. Just shit everywhere. So that was the visual that I got from this office. But they fight, then they leave, and go down to, to leave, and get away. Later on, we've got this, some of the stuff I'm forgetting, but we get to a plane sequence. We get a really good description of, first of all, we got a black-haired guy who was their boss, who's Kyle Chandler's character, was described initially. You don't know it's Kyle Chandler because he's not given the name Chuck until later on. And then at the airport, there's a British operative played by Andrew Scott, who's brown-haired. That's basically all you get in black and brown-haired guys. And they help. He gives them a note before boarding the airplane, but the hangar was really well done. It was referred to as a passenger jet, and we didn't get much description on the inside. So I was thinking if it's really just kind of them, how many people are on this plane? First of all, they have to fight a lot of henchmen. I'm like, how many there's something about like a flight attendant crew or whatever that were in that they find later because they find out that the guys who are on there. So I'm like, how many flight attendants do two people need? Like there are things in here that should have rung bells for me, like because there's no mention of anybody else on this plane. So I kind of wanted to know more about the vacancy of the plane, the size of the plane, how many more people could it hold, because it seems like they literally have more flight attendants than they do people on plane. So I don't know why that is. That's not even counting, that they have at least a pilot. So, seemed like a bit much, but yeah, which meant that I needed a little bit more to know about the size of the plane itself. But we get sort of another excellently every fight sequence in here is really well written. Like the fight sequences are the star of the audio description, as is the incoming plane crash. Sorry, spoilers, but this is a quality check. I'm breaking down the whole fucking movie. Um, I thought the plane crash was really well done. The stuff about the fuselage like sliding down a mountain, really well done. Everything about like the guy getting sucked out the hole, great. We're all on top of that. The one thing that I thought was kind of silly, and this is one of the things about the movie, was that these guys are spies, so they have sort of like limited and they're sort of on a crunch time. But then they get down and they had to make the joke about this, but like Cameron Diaz just happens to have all of these pregnancy tests with her. And I'm like, where did she have these? She's a spy. She has limited baggage. Is her purse just full of pregnancy tests and nothing else? No spy equipment? Because there's a scene where on the plane where she has to pull out and it's literally like she like dumps a handful of pregnancy tests out, and then he starts to pick them up and she's like, I peed on those. I'm like, okay, we got that joke out of the way, but that's one of the reasons why this movie didn't get an A. Is I was like, okay, it's a gag, but it's a gag that also doesn't make any sense because they're spies. One pregnancy test would have been enough. We saw her take one. Oodles of pregnancy tests for a professional spy seems ridiculous. So there was another thing sort of in that moment where she goes in to kiss him and then retches. That's a total visual cue because there was nothing there to suggest that they were about to kiss. So I like that because that gave us that. So that was good. You would have still gotten the sound of her like trying not to vomit, but because that's a sound effect. Plane crashes, then they're lost in the wilderness and trying to figure out how to escape. The one thing that I thought was interesting was we made a choice to talk about the folded parachute they were carrying and not like how either one of them should look like an absolute hot mess coming out of this. Like just a total fuck shit of mess is what they should be looking like because they just survived a plane crash and like as the plane was crashing and flying off of a mountain, they parachuted out of it. So they should look ragged as shit. But instead, the little bit of time that we have to describe maybe how I'm sure they look really fucked up, we instead mention that they're carrying a parachute, but it never pays off. There's never a payoff for the carrying of the parachute. So, whatever. We move forward 15 years. They're later on, they decide that they have to, whatever, go under, deep under, hide, because they think everybody will assume that they died in the plane crash. So they go have this suburban life. She's pregnant, so obviously they have their first kid, Alice. They have a second kid later on, Leo, who's 12. So they have a 14 and 12-year-old. Leo has a little bit more description given to him than everyone else. But even that is like not much. He just happens to get it before Alice. Alice doesn't get her hairstyle until later on in the club. We're with Alice for a while before we know anything about her. Like, she comes out, she has some dialogue, she goes about her day. We see her, we actually find out more about her boyfriend than we do her. They also choose not to racially define the mixed race kids that they're obviously Cameron and Jamie would produce. So there's nothing about their skin tone. They don't even broach it. They're just like, they don't even there's no calling them mixed or biracial or light skinned or anything like that. They nothing. Just fucking Leo and Alice. We're just not touching it with a 10-foot pole. And to me, that indicates somebody who's uncomfortable talking about it. So, again, we're in this weird place where Cameron is fair skinned. Everyone else is white when they're mentioned, if they fall under that category. Kyle Chandler and Andrew Scott and Glenn Close, all white. Um, and then everybody else is black, Jamie and some other people. The kids, nah. Okay, who knows? Blue aliens, I don't know. Also, their home is really underdescribed. I know that there isn't a whole lot of time because Jamie and Cameron are constantly bantering. They are constantly bantering, but literally we got kitchen, living room, and then later on they're in the bedroom. Like, it is so limited. Oh, and there's a garage. And the one thing I learned about the garage was through an action sequence later on in the film where they burst out, they send one car out through one garage door, and then I guess the other one is still down, so they have to drive through the other one. So they have like at least a two-car garage, but it's a separated, like, so it's like two singles for anybody who can picture that. I know blind people, we don't drive a lot, but I think we can still picture garages. Run with me on this. Um, so, and the stuff about them when they do escape, it was all good. But yeah, there were things like Alice like goes into like a different room upstairs, goes into Leo's room, I think, and we got no transition. I didn't know what Leo's room was like. I didn't know if it was Leo's room or the living room. I had no idea. And the parents were fighting. I didn't know where they were until later on. That's like in the bedroom. So there was a lot of stuff that happened like in and around this house that was just kind of messy. But also at the same time, not a lot of time to really do anything because they won't stop talking. So even though I'm criticizing it, it's just something I'm making a note of because it's odd. Like, it stands out to me as being like everything else is like really well described. Every other palatial home that they walk into has tons of audio description. Later on, we'll go to another house and it'll be really well described. Their home, not so much. But yeah, we learn about Alice's boyfriend, 16-year-old boyfriend. He gets some audio description about what he looks like. There's a scene with some binoculars. Then they do this scene, which I didn't fully understand because she hadn't quite cracked the password yet to get on the thing, but they could see her texts without logging in. So they knew that Alice was up to no good. And then, but we were following that on the screen. And then they go to the club, and there's some kung fu fighting that goes on in the club, where Alice is. She was supposed to be at a friend's house, but she's at a club. And they get her, take her home. And then, of course, the trends, because there's a thing with people holding up their phones, because that's what kids do nowadays when we see things. They just hold up phones. There's a TV show that On Call where I thought was just showed how hilariously stupid we are as people now, because there was like a cop that got shot and was dying, and everybody just like holding up their phones and recording it. And I'm like, who are you people? No one's gonna try to help. So once again, everybody just pulls out their phones. This is my weapon. So anyway, yeah, they move on, and Kyle Chandler shows up. He has a little thing, and then he gets shot. And the description there was believable enough for what needs to happen later. That was fine. There's a huge like team that rolls up on them with black SUVs. Every car that's described that has a color is generally black, I believe. I don't think we ever have a car of any other color other than black. And then they burst away and they get away. They have to go get the kids. And then they fly to England. Both airports were crowded. We got note of that. Um, they escaped onto a bus where there's like already a goon. There's literally like a thug just chilling on the bus, and I was thinking to myself, like, is there like a criminal enterprise that is so vast that they just ask random thugs to just hang out on buses just in case? You know, what's your job, man? Oh, I work for the organization. I ride buses. You never know when I'm needed. But this guy on the bus, this random thug that happens to be on the bus they get on, while Andrew Scott is rushing at the airport, and they make Andrew Scott so shady. He also has acquired a black partner, a black female partner, who doesn't have a name immediately, but he has acquired one. Um, and they get on the bus, and we get a description about sort of like an old man who Cameron bumps into and steals keys so they can get into his Land Rover. So description about the Land Rover specifically, which is cluttered with trash, and I guess some cigarettes and stuff. Um, but yeah, the thug speaks another language, and this is the first and I believe only time that a male voice speaks in another language, because we did get another voice came in. They hired somebody else to come in and do uh, the subtitle translation. So for both of them, he read for both males because you can hear Goro, whatever his name is, on the other end of the phone, and did the translation. So that was nice. And meanwhile, Nefertiti was doing the switch of voices to let you know like who was talking. So they get in the car, they drive off. Parents are like, "Well, we got to get rid of the phones, SIM cards, whatever." So they break them. Later on, there's a gas station thing. That gas station fight sequence is pretty good. Some bikers roll up. We get a couple of quick descriptions about each one of the bikers, including one that's female. While the kids are in like the most British uh, uh, petrol station ever, where every piece of food that's in there is like abnormally British. Like, would you like some blood sausage? Like, no, man. Like, is that even that popular of a food? It's just like, do you... God, I'm surprised they weren't offered fish and chips for breakfast. Um, but yeah, so some fighting happens. There's some cool stuff done with fire. And then we later will see the female biker will use her phone, and Nefertiti has to do the translation. So they didn't hire another female, which is fine. But it's just like a male for male, I guess, female for female. So she calls in and says something in another language that Nefertiti translates. Then they move on, and eventually, I'm moving fast through this, by the way. There's this gaming console that Leo has that gets thrown out the window and used to throw off Andrew Scott, who seems to know always where they are, which makes him always shady. Um, like he just finds them really easily. Uh, he's the greatest Hufflepuff that ever was. And then they move into this manor thing, which is where Cameron Diaz's mom, which is where they needed to go because that's where Jamie Foxx had hid the MacGuffin a long time ago. She lives in this huge ass house, big palatial estate, big iron gates, everything about the grounds and everything. Later on, like Jamie and Cameron are gonna like walk the grounds, and we get this like footbridge and these stone steps and this iron gate that they have to walk through. It's just everything. It's just so in detail. Every room in the house has far more detail in Glenn's house than it does in Grandma Glenn, um, than it does in any other house. Like her kitchen is referred to as being like big, but I never know how big Cameron's was. Living room, you know, the furniture and everything, fancy furniture. Of course, her house has turrets. She also has this younger white boyfriend, Nigel, um, who's goofy and funny and whatever, really bad at, but also whatever, I don't know. So he wants to be called Grandpa. He's fun. I liked him. And they, of course, people find them. There's like a helicopter. There's like a tactical team that drops in on them, takes the kids. Parents have to go get the kids. More action sequences, more fight sequences. Uh, really just barreling on toward the end of the film. And I don't want to tell you how it ends, but that's a quality check. So, I my in general, I really love the action sequences. I thought those were really well described. I love the fact that for the most part, we went in on representation in terms of description by letting people know this diverse cast and what they actually look like. And a couple of people got character descriptions out, like aside from that, in terms of like hairstyles, beards. Not always so much about the clothes that they were wearing, although we did get some clothing. There were some clothing options that were given. Leo and uh, Annie, whatever the daughter, the son and daughter were both underdescribed as characters. They just were. It's feel like people. I think if you don't want to describe them ethnically or whatever, you got to make up for it in like clothing style or something else. Like it just felt like they were underdescribed in general as characters. As was the house. Like every other house that we spend way less time in, um, is like super established. You know, like we get like that first house. They're in that for like a minute, two, and it's so well described. So yeah, it's something that I would have wanted more from. But but my grade for the audio description is still really high. Why? Because I'm a realist. Because I look at what happened here and I look at the choices and I'm like, there are only a couple choices where I would have actually swapped, where they could have actually made a different and better choice. Because when I say this is dialogue heavy, I mean this is dialogue heavy. This is like a buddy cop movie where Jamie and Cameron will not shut up. Like their whole thing is based on banter. These are not people who ever take 5 minutes to be quiet in their life. These are two people who are living vicariously through dialogue. So it makes it really hard in some of these sequences. Like, yes, their house is underdescribed, but they won't shut up. So where do you get the opportunity? There are very few times, and they take the few times to be able to throw something in. So at least we know they're in a kitchen or a living room. But that may be the only the second that they have is just enough to put out the syllables for kitchen, not large kitchen or fancy kitchen. You know what I'm saying? Like they can't put anything else on there because my God, they have to make another wisecrack. Um, so the realist on this is there were only a couple times where I really felt like I would have swapped out something for something else. So I think this is a really strong audio description track, even though it seemed like I just bitched about it for 30 minutes. But that's what a quality check is. It's acknowledging the fact that there are things that may not quite work. Uh, we might be able to find a different way through. We might be able to get to the other side of something. But the realist is that sometimes you just get what you get. Sometimes people just don't shut up and there aren't there. What do you want? I don't want them trampling the dialogue because that would drop the grade. So there's really nothing else here. I also thought Nefertiti did a really nice job as a narrator. I thought the balancing here, mixing, which often goes underappreciated, was really well done. Descriptive Video Works had a very well mixed track here. So all in all, my grade for the audio description track for this is an A minus. It's not perfect. I'm not gonna put like throw this on a award at the end of the year for excellence in audio description, but it's a very solid track that only like maybe a couple of tweaks, uh, maybe. So that's it. Thanks for watching. This has been Quality Check on. This has been my first quality check on a movie. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you guys on the other side.